Hello and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining me again. My name is Wilky and we're back with the next Battlerite Champion Spotlight. Today we're going to be taking a look at Eva, the Scavenging Inventor, or for this season BLC players, the Engineer. Now the Engineer is a ranged type of DPS character, and as usual, infinite energy, infinite cooldowns. Now his first ability is, or her, this one is actually a female character. If I do remember correctly, the Engineer used to be male, but I might be mistaken here, so sorry if I actually confuse the genders on this one. But I'll try my best not to. Anyways, her first ability is called Boomstick, which is basically a shotgun that fires 4 pellets. And yeah, obviously I currently have cooldowns, so if I turn these off, you can see this little number here saying 3. And every time you take a shot, it'll deplete. And as soon as you're at 0, it'll take, I guess, roughly a second. You can see this animation of her reloading, and during that time you cannot shoot your left click, so keep that in mind, that it might not look like this in regular battle. Her second ability is Rocket Axe 67, which is a pretty long range, decent damage rocket that deals a good amount of splash as well as high damage on impact. The splash actually only deals 12 damage, but the impact 24. So hitting an enemy with that is pretty good. It also ignites the enemy should they be covered in oil. And covered in oil is what happens if you were to use your spacebar and travel over the enemies. The spacebar is called Jetpack, where Eva will fly over the enemies, and you can see that she will leave a trail of oil behind the enemy. And if the enemy gets spilled or gets caught in this oil trail, you can see that the enemy will be turned visibly like grayish, blackish. That will indicate that they are covered in oil, and if you land the right click after that, it'll apply the burning oil, which deals 21 damage over 6 seconds. Now, as I mentioned with the Alchemist or Lucy, that's similar to this one. Whoops. We're gonna reset these guys. That's similar to Lucy's Toxic Dot. Burning oil cannot actually kill the enemy, so keep that in mind, that this will not be able, whoops, we actually do have to take, alright, this is gonna work. And you can see that he will burn down to 1 HP, but he will not be able to die because of this dot, or how the mechanics basically work. Anyways, other than that, oil reduces the movement speed of enemies for 4 seconds by 30%. Keep in mind though that as soon as you ignite them, that oil will be consumed and they will not be slowed anymore. Her Q ability is called Zap, which removes all negative effects of herself or an ally, as well as absorbing 28 damage and increasing movement speed by 50%, which is pretty good for chasing, for running away, or for helping yourself or teammates getting out of sticky situations should the spacebar not be available. Her E is called Taser, which is a non-damaging ability, but it has a very good on-hit effect or stun effect. Basically how this works is that as soon as you hit the enemy with Taser, they will be applied, or the debuff called Interrupt will be applied for 0.5 seconds. And unfortunately I will not be able to show you, or it does actually work. You can see this cast bar above characters, and as soon as you hit the enemy during one of his casting motions, this interrupt will trigger, and the trigger effect is 1.2 second stun, which will not be interrupted by any damage. So this is actually a very good CC ability. It also helps you disrupt enemies, prevent them from hastily casting or spamming moves. And keep in mind that stuff like ultimates usually are channeling abilities, for example the one of Sirius or Shifu. So this one can also be used to instantly disrupt channeling abilities. This is pretty much all for her basic abilities. Let's take a look at her X abilities. Her first X ability is Flamethrower, which consumes 2 or 50% of her energy, but it deals 50 damage over time, and just like the rocket, it'll ignite or apply burning oil to the enemy. And this flamer actually is able to turn relatively quick. As I said, 50 damage is quite a lot. But it comes as a price though, like I said, 50 energy is quite steep. But what's also cool to notice about this is that the flamer will not trigger on-hit effects or effects like counter. So if the enemy is scared or maybe in a pinch or a panic situation, there is a good chance that they might to try actually pull off counter while you try to flame them, and you can just freely fry them afterwards. A very strong damaging ability Eva has at her disposal. And as I said, if you manage to oil the enemy first, it'll also apply the burning oil, which deals, on top of that, another 21 damage. Pretty damn good. Her second X ability is gonna change the taser into concussion shot, which deals 10 damage and incapacitates the enemy for 3 seconds. Now this cannonball actually flies relatively quick and is sometimes hard to dodge, and can be coming at a very good and surprising moment. Also, like I said, 3 seconds incapacitate, very long CC duration. However, any sort of damage, no matter how big it might be, even one of these bullets, let's see, will actually wake up the enemy. So make sure you apply this concussion shot to enemies that are usually far off the fight or are not in risk of getting hit. Her third X ability is called Tractor Beam, which basically pulls enemies in to whichever direction you pull this tractor beam. Also, all projectiles and melee hits from the direction you're pointing from will be completely negated. Now, I'll show you this over at this dummy here, how this works. Also, it'll pull enemies towards you and it'll slow them. So this can be used pretty good to disrupt enemies. It doesn't actually work if I'm not... Alright, let's just pull this guy backwards. Unfortunately, it doesn't block if I'm actually behind the enemy, but as you can see, I'm not taking any damage whatsoever. So this is a very good ability to disrupt some high damaging abilities. If you're on the front line and you're, for example, here Jade winding up a snipe and you don't know where she might be, or you have a hunch but you don't have any spacebar or shields up, this can be used in order to protect yourself, at the cost of 25 energy though. And for her last ability, Machine Gun, deals a total of 140 damage over 2.4 seconds. Pretty high damage output. Relatively long channeling, can be turned relatively good, unlike Astro, so you can actually, as you can see, you can spray around the whole screen. Has a pretty long range actually. You don't actually see it, but I'm actually hitting the orb, and I just killed the orb with that. So this one actually deals a fair amount of damage, however, comes with a drawback of you being immobile again, channeling, so you're vulnerable to counters and stuff like disables. Also, if the enemy has any sort of, let's say, mobility, shield or anything, you might actually not be able to land so much damage. However, when done right, and if the enemy cannot escape, this ultimate is absolutely devastating. Anyways, this is pretty much the spotlight about Eva, the Inventor, or for the BLC people, the Engineer. Hopefully you guys enjoyed another champion spotlight for Battlerite. And as always, I appreciate your feedback, also criticism, positive and negative feedback. And as always, see ya.